talk about the
So, yeah, your
the,
experience with the translocation.
the Washington augmentation. It it's not a small endeavor to go up into BC and catch caribou in the winter, and get them down to the U.S. for release. It's not a small task. What's involved is we net gun out of a helicopter, and then take the animals back to a holding facility. You have to hold them for, I think it was a minimum of 3 days for some disease testing to get them across the border. But the capture operation itself involves flying in a helicopter. They have the doors off. There's one guy hanging out of the helicopter with a net that's shot down over. It's a tangle net is basically all it is. To tangle up, and then somebody has to jump out of the helicopter lands real quick. Somebody jumps out of the helicopter, and then you run up and jump on this caribou and get it to the ground, and then you can put hobbles on it and stuff. But it's not a trivial exercise, and you're doing it in the middle of winter. But when we, on one of Washington's augmentation efforts, we went up there. They were working 2 helicopters, and the choice of pilots you had was a fairly old, quite overweight chain smoker as a pilot. He carried a mason jar between his legs so he could sneak in some puffs while he was operating this helicopter to zoom down on these caribou. And the other guy, so that was one choice of pilot. The other pilot only had one good eye. They called him Radar. So, it's like, well, which helicopter? Because we're skimming over treetops. What we typically do is you'd stay at a little bit higher elevation and find tracks and find a group of caribou, and woodland caribou typically hang out in fairly small groups, 5, 6 animals, something like that a lot of times. But you'd find a group of caribou typically in the treed cover, and then you'd have to locate the nearest opening. And you'd kind of work with the helicopter, you'd work these caribou to the opening, and then as soon as you got in the opening, the helicopter would swoop down, and the guy hanging out would shoot the net gun on him, and then you'd land and hopefully get the caribou. But so, it's fairly intensive flying, and depth perception is fairly important in this stuff because you got trees and everything. But so you had your choice of the old overweight chain smoker or the one-eyed guy, Radar. So I took my chances with Radar. I climbed in his ship, and everything worked out fine. But the whole procedure is a little bit nerve-wracking in the first place. It's fairly dangerous flying. You're realizing this guy has limited depth perception because of his one good eye, but it worked, it worked fine. We did capture caribou, so that was fairly interesting. Yeah.
And you were the one who went down and jumped on the caribou after it was in the net.
Yeah. There's the guy hanging out of the ship's called the gunner, and then the guys that jump out of the helicopter and jump on the caribou are called the muggers. So yeah, I was a mugger in the whole deal. And sometimes it worked out great, and sometimes it was a little bit of a fiasco. But we managed to catch caribou. Nobody crashed. Nobody died. So that's always a good thing.